Bitcoin is the original cryptocurrency. Crypto refers to cryptography because Bitcoin is cryptographically secured. The difference, I'll say, in Bitcoin and all other cryptos is none of those other cryptos carry the same features as Bitcoin in the same combined sort of sequence. That would be absolute scarcity, weightlessness or portability, decentralization. Some of them are trying to replace it, but nothing so far has been able to replace Bitcoin.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode. So if you are questioning the idea of crypto, if you wonder what crypto means, if you wonder what decentralization means, if you've ever thought about investing or buying or doing something in the crypto world and you haven't done it yet, or you're even curious to learn about more in that space and specifically around Bitcoin, which you may have heard of, maybe you didn't. And so today's episode is going to unpack some of that for you guys today. So I brought somebody in here to talk about asset wealth building and alternatives like we've talked about before. And here's one particular area that some of you might be interested in listening to as we vary off of the e-commerce conversation just a little bit. And we go into a pretty hot button topic for a lot of people in today's world, which wouldn't you agree, Eric? This is a pretty volatile conversation of topics.
Yeah, absolutely. And can be controversial as well.
No doubt. So let's get that unpacked here today on this episode. So Eric, welcome to the call, brother.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Where are you located for those? I mean, maybe you want to say disclaimer, I may or may not be in this location. I don't know if you don't want people to know.
No, I don't need to hide my location or anything.
Okay,
yet.
Good. All right. You're good. You don't know what this program or anything like that works.
Not yet.
Okay. Awesome.
Not as of today. I'm in sunny Central Oregon, a little town called Madras, about an hour north of Bend.
Yeah. And as I was talking to you in the green room before, I grew up in the Oregon area as well. Very familiar with that. And of course, up near Sun River and into Bend and that, and the high desert country of Oregon. It's beautiful up there. A lovely area to live. Are you from that area then? Did you move there? Or?
I grew up here. I'm a third generation Oregonian. Lived in Portland for about 20 years. And about a year ago, moved back over here to where my roots were.
About a year ago? That was a lot going on a year ago in Portland, wasn't there?
There was a lot, and there remains a lot. So
yes.
we are happy to watch things from a distance.
Distance yourself. Okay, cool. I live about an hour from a major city too. So I'm just watching with binoculars from a distance to see.
Yeah.
We see. But hey, Bitcoin, this is a hot button word, right? Everybody wants to talk about all these crazy things and predictions, and we won't get into that today, but let's just talk about what it means. Maybe ask the first question, what is money? Let's start with the big ask, right? What is money?
Yeah, that's a fairly deep question. But at the end of the day, money is a system for transferring and storing value. So money really has two jobs. If you think about the US dollar, to be a medium of exchange. So, you could buy dinner with it, or store value, meaning I have $100,000 and I want to hold that value over, let's say, a decade without losing purchasing power. So those are really the two things. There are other people like Michael Saylor who would talk about money as energy, which is a bit abstract. But if you think about, since we're talking about Oregon, the Benson Hotel was created by a guy named Benson. And what he did was he laid train tracks out into the forest to cut down trees and then bring those in to use for building projects. That was his invention. He took raw value from the earth as it stands, translated that into something that people were willing to exchange value for. And in so doing, he got rich. So
yeah,
money is like the store of value. And then you should also be able to use it as a medium of exchange as well.
And how long has money been in that capacity? Has it ever had any major changes?
Since the dawn of history, we've used different things for money. We've used glass beads. The Africans did at one point, seashells. I think the Yap people used a giant stone.
Yeah, a little harder to transfer value there, huh?
Yeah, it would just sit in one place. But that's what their sort of collateral was. Gold came to be the most efficient and accepted form of money for various reasons. A few of them were, it was scarce. It was really hard to just double the supply of gold, which is really important because if you double the supply of something, the laws of supply and demand dictate that the value of the thing drops by about 50%.
Yeah.
Scarcity is important. Gold's really hard to make. You have to go into the hills and mine it. It's dangerous. So you can't just create it out of thin air. There's some other qualities, but recognizability, durability, as opposed to, let's just say, oranges. If you used oranges for money, store them for about 2 weeks and then they rot. So they're not durable. But I'll tell you, gold's main problem, and we could hop into this later, was ultimately its weight. and portability. And that's where I think, in my opinion, gold failed as a long-term store of value.
Yeah, it really is. Actually, it's what we consider to be even silver or other precious metals like gold tend to
Mm,
be an asset transfer, a wealth preservation
mhm.
strategy as opposed to like trading or usage,
Yes.
as I understand it in my limited knowledge of this. But we had,
Yeah.
a period in time when we had silver certificates backed from any, paper asset that had to be transferred back to a physical asset, and that kind of changed in 1917 with the dawn of a new era of fiat currency
Yeah.
backed by the Federal Reserve, which really changed a lot of things. And it created something called inflation. You want to unpack that for us a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So 1913, the Fed was created. Two significant dates in the 20th century, 1913 and then 1971.
Yeah.
I think 1971 serves as a great illustration. So by 1971, the US was 6 times more in debt, mostly due to the Vietnam War, than it had the gold reserves to back up. And so Nixon goes on TV. You can pull up these clips on YouTube if you want to. He temporarily, and that's a key word, temporarily depegs the dollar from gold. So it used
Hmm.
to be that every dollar that you had, you could go and redeem it for a certain amount of gold.
Right.
He, what do you want to say? He didn't destroy it. That's a strong word. Nixon basically removes that as an opportunity.
Yeah.
And so now, 50 plus years later, we're still temporarily depegged from gold. What happened in the next 5 years was inflation jumped up to about 10% per year. And then ever since then, we've had unprecedented inflation since 71. And now inflation is just sort of the air that we breathe. Before I
Yeah.
started studying this out, I just assumed in the back of my mind that everything always goes up in price all the time. But when you go back and study it from the founding of the country until 1971, price has remained relatively flat. The only exceptions were like major world wars where the government had to like print money to fund the war or create money or whatever. But the point is, prices jumped only during major world events, world war events, until 1971. And then they jumped to massively unprecedented heights that we've never seen. So Nixon introduced the world to fiat currency. It didn't just affect America, it affected all other countries. We can go into detail about that, but that's essentially the history of inflation in a nutshell.
Yeah. And it's a transitory thing. So it really kind of lives on at this point until some situation may change our national debt that removes inflationary situations against that dollar. And there's a word fiat we've talked about before, and hopefully people listening to this understand what that word means. Yeah, how does that relate in terms of your strategy for Bitcoin versus fiat? If we might transfer that,
Mhm.
boundary and kind of switch this just a little bit into why fiat and inflation versus Bitcoin and other things.
Yeah, it's a good transition and a good question because fiat currency, not just fiat alone, but the entire ecosystem that fiat essentially enabled is ultimately, according to the creators of Bitcoin, why Bitcoin was invented. So, brief history of Bitcoin. Somewhere around 1974, the groups of computer scientists or IT guys began working on a digital cash system. And each successive generation of computer guys, the cypherpunks included,
Hmm.
would run up against a problem that then they couldn't solve. And then the next generation of guys would come in and they'd be able to solve that. But then they couldn't solve the next one. So finally, but they kept making improvements. Finally, 2009, Satoshi Nakamoto launches Bitcoin, and it appeared to have solved all of the problems that the previous generations weren't able to solve.
Yeah.
Embedded into the first block of transactions was a quote that said something like, "Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks." And
Hmm.
so this happened in the context of the 2008, 2007, 2008 financial crisis.
Bailout.
And that was, yeah, it was clearly a very self-conscious move
Hmm.
to work and function as an alternate system in either parallel or opposition or both to the fiat world.
Yeah. So there's a number of different kinds of coins. Let's define it for people who don't maybe know just yet, and keep it at the 101 until we get to the 401 level conversation here. But there is culture coins, there's meme coins, there are utility coins, there's Delphi, there's a whole lot of things. Explain some of the differences maybe for people on those.
Yeah, that's another great question. So Bitcoin is the original cryptocurrency. Crypto refers to cryptography because Bitcoin is cryptographically secured. Other coins carry some of those features as well, but other coins are either designed to compete with or stand in opposition to Bitcoin, or just serve another purpose altogether. So the difference, I'll say, in Bitcoin and all other cryptos is none of those other cryptos, there's, I don't know, 3 to 10,000 different cryptos at any given time. None of them carry the same features as Bitcoin in the same combined sort of sequence. So that would be absolute scarcity, weightlessness or portability, decentralization. That's a big one. And then there's a few other features. But the point is that other cryptos are designed to do something different than Bitcoin. Some of them are trying to replace it, but nothing so far has been able to replace Bitcoin.
With that decentralized nature, and basically, from my limited understanding, there's a blockchain of information in which multiple pieces of that block are stored on separate computers, separate locations, separate wallets. So being decentralized means that even if someone got one section of that, they can't unpack the entire component of it. That's where the crypto component of it comes in, the cryptography, right? So
yeah,
I'm gonna give my technical stuff right here. You probably know a lot better than I do.
Yeah, more or less. The way that I think of decentralization is that there's no key inventor of or controller of Bitcoin, i.e. no middleman. So a really easy way to understand it is if you go to the grocery store and buy a loaf of bread and then you swipe your debit card, it looks like your money went from your account to the grocery store's account. But in reality, there's a hidden middleman, the bank, who has their finger on the permission button. And in principle, they could lift their finger off the permission button at any time. In Canada, that's actually how they shut down the Canadian truckers movement during COVID.
Yeah,
they just revoked permission. What's that?
Yeah, exactly. It was a terrible use of power, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, my understanding is that there's laws in the United States that prevent the government from just arbitrarily doing that. But the point is that there's still a middleman and a key third party. That's part and parcel to a centralized system. A certain player, government, corporation, controls the flow and permission and access to the money.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is decentralized in that it's peer-to-peer. If I send money to you, there's literally nobody in between that transaction.
Yeah.
And so nobody can say yes or no to it. So that makes it permissionless. Our current system doesn't seem like it's permission-based because generally speaking, nobody cuts off our funding. But it doesn't really account that there is that hidden player behind the scenes keeping their finger on the permission button. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. And hopefully for people that are listening as well. So when we look at that and we understand certain investments in a traditional sense would be to something I'm doing, a product I have, or a company that is a physical company deployed, in the world with sales and marketing. And I put money into that. And that's a real company, quote unquote, with business and profit and loss and this kind of stuff. How do people get over the gap with Bitcoin? Because in some ways, it's like a fiat. In some ways, we have to have faith that its value is sustained by the other peers on the network, don't we?
Yes and no. Fiat, technically defined, is because I said so. Coin at first glance.
That's a great way of putting it. I've never heard it that way before. Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard Robert Breedlove talk about the opening pages of Genesis.
Yeah.
And he says, regardless of your religious views, when the Bible says that God spoke into existence the heavens and the earth,
yeah,
that's an example of fiat. It's because God said so. Well, God can do that if he wants to, because he has the power to speak ex nihilo stuff into existence. But when the government says the US dollar has value because we said so, that's completely arbitrary. It has value because everybody agrees that it has value, and the government keeps backing it with tax power and other things like that. Fiat itself doesn't have necessarily inherent qualities that keep its value propped up. It's all based on sort of agreement. Bitcoin has, like I said before, characteristics that are rooted more in principle, economic principle, than simply because I said so. So if we honed in just on scarcity, it's an economic principle of that when when demand increases and supply can't meet it, that the only thing really at that point that can move is the price. So that's the law of supply and demand.
Yep.
Bitcoin is absolutely finite in that there will only ever be 21 million that are created. So what that means is, in a world where demand continues to increase, if that's actually the case, we don't know the future, but let's just argue for a minute that that were the case. No matter how much demand existed for Bitcoin, Bitcoin's supply would not move because it can't, because it's written into the code. Therefore, the only thing that can increase is the price.
Demand
Um,
elasticity, supply and demand, right?
yeah, absolutely
No,
inelastic.
yeah, elastic. It's absolutely elastic. We watched just to tie that back to last Friday at the time we're recording. It's the 14th of October, but everybody who's maybe paid a little attention to the markets at all saw the 10th really, shave off what 9.8 billion in the crypto markets and quite a lot more in the regular markets. A lot of that's kind of come back as I've seen it over the last 2-3 days, but and a lot of people took a great opportunity to get in it on the trading options or other side. Are you involved in any of that kind of tradings and options and buying and selling of it? Or are you a holder? Are you a long-term holder?
Yeah, I'm definitely a long-term holder in philosophy, and I try to lead my clients in that direction as well. I don't believe Bitcoin. I mean, you can make money trading, don't get me wrong, but I don't believe in Bitcoin as a trading asset.
Okay.
Yeah, my belief is toward long-term buy and hold.
Well, and you look at the collective peer-to-peer belief system, and now that even our government has said it's part of a sovereign wealth fund, along with 3 or 4 other, cryptos, utility and or non-utility based coins, that's bolstered the faith in it, hasn't it?
You're talking about the US government sort of endorsing it, as it were.
The sovereign wealth fund component of it, yeah.
Time will tell on that.
Mhm.
I don't know if people are thinking of that as an endorsement or not. I'm not
Yeah.
sure what the SEC would say about whether or not that constitutes an endorsement, but
We don't want
I
to endorse.
think what we are definitely seeing are more and more institutional movers publishing their Bitcoin holdings.
Yeah.
And so you've got the emergence of what's called a Bitcoin treasury company. There's over 200 companies now that are putting Bitcoin on their books as a treasury asset.
Yep.
At least one sovereign wealth fund is embracing it. El Salvador has embraced it as a currency. So far, it looks like institutions are moving toward the adoption of Bitcoin right now.
Yeah, it seems to be moving that way very fast,
Mhm.
with large amounts of capital being dedicated to the growth of it, which is
Yes.
for me just very fascinating.
Yeah, me
How
too. I
fast
love
this has moved, right? I
Yeah.
held a little bag of it a long time ago. I wish I'd not sold it at $600. I should have just left it alone. How do you not touch it when it goes up? How do you?
You mean psychologically?
Yeah, well, I mean, just mess with it. Like I sold it at 19. I thought I was doing great. Maybe I know, and I realize now I should have just left it, which makes it feel like it's too late to get in at this price point. Of like a minute ago was like 112,000 at a coin. Does that make sense to you? And how do you explain that,
Yeah.
or how do you rationalize that with people?
I mean, I hear it all the time and it's very understandable. I think there are two dangerous points of Bitcoin, and that's the bottom and the
Nope.
top. Because when you're at the bottom, wherever that is, you can never predict it, but whatever your bottom is, where psychologically you are washed out of Bitcoin and you like have to sell to make yourself feel better, that's very
Yep.
dangerous. But the top is dangerous because you're tempted to sell based on the opposite emotion. My belief is that Bitcoin is worth holding. So Michael Saylor was asked the question at some point on an interview, when are you going to cash out of Bitcoin and sort of take your gains? And he said, I'm not going to. Why would I sell a winner to buy a loser? Now he can say things like that because he's not RIA registered and, SEC compliant. That
Yeah.
implies that Bitcoin is the future and is going to go up forever, which I'm not trying to imply.
No, that's
I'm
his
simply,
record. Yep.
yeah, but I'm simply honing in on his psychology of if he thinks that's the most superior asset, he would never sell the top because
You
it wouldn't
wouldn't
make
if you
sense.
had it in anyway. Like if I was sitting on a stack of gold or hypothetically anything else, I would look at that and go, okay, well, that's mine. I know it sounds like a hoarding thing, which
Well, it is a hoarding thing.
it was. Yeah, you're
Not in
right.
a bad
It is.
way.
Which, well, there's always some component of this with families and men specifically driven to provide and protect and build legacy. And one of the ways we feel like we need to build legacy is with wealth transfer to our families, with something we have built that we can hand down, like our grandfathers did or other family members.
Yes. Well, I think the fiat system has imbued us with an inherited guilt script that says that if you want more, that you're necessarily guilty because the world, what we see around us is everything is sort of going downhill in terms of money losing value. And it exists in our system, although we can't quite put our finger on it. So
Yeah.
who are you to want more? I know I've thought those thoughts and then
Sure.
Yeah, I've not really struggled with the guilt of that because I've always been a capitalist. But once I realized that the fiat system incentivizes certain behavior, I didn't feel
Does
bad at all about,
about
hey,
what
I
he's
want generational wealth to 10 generations. That's what I'm looking to do.
No, I get it. And it's one of those things that, that could sound greedy to some people, but to others, it's like, yeah, I completely get it. But, money's as a current, really, at the end of the day, it flows and it moves and it shakes and it goes one direction, it goes up and it goes down and moves. And now it's moving into different types of monetary assets or
Yeah.
even, currencies and cryptos and others that are changing, restructuring the way we think about money, even down to the way they might deal with our debt in the country based on the kind of situation that's happening in the markets. And there's so much going on. How do you keep
Mhm.
up with all of it, man? Are you on the are you 24/7 into this? Are you like, do you take any breaks? Like, how do you keep up on all of it?
Well, it's definitely my calling. I'm fascinated with Bitcoin. I come home on winter nights, especially when there's not much to do outside and, watch updates on YouTube before I go to bed, but it's not work for me. I enjoy it.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're more passionate about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I was put on this earth to talk about Bitcoin.
So how does somebody like in the beginner conversation, which is where we're still at, maybe we're moving into to 201. Let's go up a level in our conversation here and just say,
Mhm.
okay, if someone is listening to this and thinking, well, I've never bought into it. I don't know what that even means. Is it safe? How do I do it safely? And isn't it better to just leave that money sitting in my bank account or maybe to put
Mm.
it in a stock? Like, how do I know that putting it into Bitcoin isn't going to see the bottom or not? And I know this is not a thing for you to answer in a predictive measure because we're not going to do that, but like, how do we know what we don't know? And maybe some of that's fear, but I know people operate under that decision. And I'm just lengthening my question out to keep it really simple. Really, what are the
Yeah.
steps to get in, and why would I get in right now at these kind of prices? Wouldn't I wait for it to
Mm.
drop before I get in? How far would it drop before I do get in?
Mhm. Yeah. There's like 20 questions in there. So I'll try to
There
hit
was,
them as
sorry.
much.
They're just
No, no,
rolling out of my head as I'm thinking, how do I present this?
no. It's a
Forgive me,
great question
I'm
because
just ripping them off.
no, it's 100% fine. I hear it all the time. I mean, as I've been in Bitcoin since about 21, from 17,000 to about 69,000, I heard, Bitcoin's had its run. And when people say, and so they're saying, what they're saying is that we're at the top, it can't go any higher.
No,
Um,
I don't believe that personally. I don't know. Maybe
well,
somebody else on
Bitcoin ended
this
at 69
podcast
and
does,
we're
but
at
I don't.
117. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but what that is it, in my opinion, I've thought a lot about this. It reveals that what they're deep down saying is, I don't understand Bitcoin. And when people understand Bitcoin, I believe that they feel safer moving in because they know what they're buying. So it's just like anything. If you didn't understand stocks, you wouldn't feel comfortable buying stocks. Warren Buffett said, invest in what you know. And so
That's right.
so the first answer to the question is study Bitcoin. If somebody wants to get in, Bitcoin is definitely a big boy asset. It's
Mm,
nothing that will baby you or coddle you. It remains speculative. It's extremely volatile. It can be very difficult to buy and it can be dangerous to buy and hold if you don't know what you're doing and or
mm,
make the right decisions. I've fallen in about every hole there is to fall into in terms of buying Bitcoin, but it's the type of asset that doesn't have a ton of rails yet in terms of being able to buy that 100% safe. Now, when I say that, I'll scare everybody listening away.
they're never going to want to buy from any platform.
They're never going to want to. Don't let me scare people away. That's not what I
No,
mean.
no, nope.
What I think is people need an advisor to help them buy it correctly. I've seen family offices who are centimillionaires make the same mistakes as regular
Mm,
people in terms
mhm.
of buying it. But the first thing is you need to study it. So put in 10 hours of studying Bitcoin, figure out exactly what it is. Then when it's time to buy, you have to make a few decisions. Do you want KYC Bitcoin, which is know your customer, in which you give up your information basically to the custodian, to Coinbase or Binance? Some people are really against KYC Bitcoin. There's non KYC Bitcoin in which you buy that from literally somebody off the street and no information is exchanged. Sounds illegal and shady. It's not. It's completely legal, but you have
Like
to know.
exchanging money. If you have a 50 and or 100 and you need two $50 bills, you basically give them 100, they give you two $50 bills. It's kind
But
of
yeah,
no different,
that's
really.
what it is. It just sounds shady when I describe it, but it's
Right.
not.
We're doing a backyard deal here. Here's 100. I
Yeah.
need two 50s. Is like, what?
Yeah, that's exactly right. But it's more like going to a flea market. They have something you want, you give them cash. It's basically what it is. It's just a free market trade is all.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are other ways to buy, depending on, again, comfort level. You can buy price action access to Bitcoin through the Bitcoin ETFs.
Mm.
That's a traditional feeling wrapper, that you don't actually own Bitcoin. But if all you're looking for is price action of Bitcoin, then you can buy the ETFs. And then that's a quicker onboard through like Charles Schwab.
I was gonna say, are you going through Schwab, TD Ameritrade, one of those larger firms in order to acquire your Bitcoin through that?
Yeah, for my clients who onboard with a Bitcoin portfolio, I use Schwab as our custodian.
I see. I
Mhm.
see. And they, of course, charge a fee to allow that exchange to occur, but that is considered, what did you say again? Action, non-action based transfer?
Yeah, it's price action access is how
Price
I would.
action access. Price action
Yeah.
access. Okay.
You're still in the fiat system. You're using dollars to buy ETFs.
Yep.
Then you're cashing back out into dollars. But if Bitcoin goes up by a factor of 2, you get the price increase or decrease minus the fees of the ETF, of course.
But Eric, that's such a strange conundrum because at that point, all you're looking at is a dashboard with two different numbers where one was said it was over here and now it's over here. I mean,
What do you mean when you say
well, okay, so I had fiat currency setting in my Schwab account and I decided to use the ETF to buy that Bitcoin. It just moves into another part of the system, shows another number that now says you hold this amount in Bitcoin, where it used to be that it was this amount in dollars. I mean,
in
that's
fiat.
literally, it's a psychological thing at the end of the day,
Mhm.
isn't it?
Well, you have to know because in the real world, you just purchased an ETF that you could show that you purchased versus actually having it. I mean, it looks like numbers on a screen, but really those ETFs do hold Bitcoin to back up their.
You're
They-
buying their pool of Bitcoin, not the available pool that's out in the regular market, if you will.
Well, yeah, because yes and no, because what happens is an ETF, in order to have the assets to back up their ETF, they have to go out into the actual pool of Bitcoin and buy Bitcoin.
Buy their pieces, buy their shares, their amount.
That's right. So when they do that, that diminishes supply available to you or me or anybody.
So that 21 million is probably going away very fast, if not faster, as more ETFs get online to be able to do that.
Yeah, reserves are being soaked up fairly quickly. I think ETFs currently are buying more, like I heard a figure 3 to 7 times more than are actually being produced by miners on a daily basis.
Interesting. So there's a increasing nature. Does it ever zero out because people will sell it? So will it ever really reach zero available coins?
Well, that's a great question. Tough to know. It seems to me it's just like real estate. There's always real estate for sale somewhere.
Yeah.
Even though it's a fairly finite asset. It seems like Bitcoin would always be for sale somewhere, but maybe it's a little bit more like Miami real estate in that it's more scarce and harder to buy. So if Bitcoin, let's say hypothetically went to a price of $1 million a coin, that could be more difficult or maybe less advantageous to buy for a regular person. It might be for a whale, it might be okay to buy, but a regular person might not want to buy Bitcoin at that rate. So I think it's more like, do you want to buy it at that level or not?
So why have you shifted Veritas, your business, into the Bitcoin specific strategy? Why do you feel like that's your main focus? Why did you change that? Why is that? What do you see that maybe others don't see? Is it a personal thing? Is it a network? Is it an experience? Is it a faith thing? Like what's tied into all that?
Boy, that's a great question. And we could unpack that one for an hour. But what I can tell you is I came from the traditional financial advisory space, and I was in that for 20 years. Never felt like a fit in that space, but I didn't know that I didn't feel like a fit for quite some time. And so because that's very commoditized, i.e., everybody sells the exact same products. You can get the same products from Edward Jones as you can from Charles Schwab, et cetera. There's really nothing that differentiates one financial advisor from another. And it took me a long time to sort of figure that out. But that space, I was never really passionate about stocks and bonds for whatever reason. Once I learned about Bitcoin, that was in 2021. At the time, there was nothing really legally that you could do if you were a registered investment advisor to sort of sell Bitcoin to your clients. But I knew that I loved it for various reasons. But then when the ETFs came out, that changed the entire game because now an RIA like myself is totally compliant. Obviously, there's disclosures and things like that. But your broader question to answer that, the reason I transitioned is because I never fit in the commoditized space working with retail clients. I just I couldn't get behind at a very deep level selling the 60/40 portfolio. Although I still think it's great and I still offer 60/40s, it was ho-hum. It was just meh. Once I realized that Bitcoin was a passion of mine and I was basically put on this earth to talk about it, I realized I wanted to figure out a way to build it into my firm's offering and then just kind of burn the boats and go all in so that all I get to do all day is talk about Bitcoin and I let others talk about AI or the 60/40 or just whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Fascinating. Yeah, we could definitely talk about that for a lot more, but we're gonna we're gonna run out of time before we get it. We'll just invite you to come back. How about that?
That sounds
Do a
good.
part two, and we'll keep digging into it.
Yeah, the
So,
psychology of the sales world in the financial
yeah,
advisory space is fascinating. I've spent hours dissecting what my experience was like and
yeah.
why I'm in a unique space now.
If you buy into it, of course, there's the opportunity for it to potentially go up or down, depending upon, where it goes for the risk. Is there an opportunity to earn dividends off of it? Like if it sets in there, can it earn an interest? Can you get, profits off if it's just sitting there
Mm.
versus selling
Not
it?
not directly. No, there
Okay.
are Bitcoin derivative products that offer interest or dividends. But if you hold Bitcoin itself, the raw on-chain asset, it's what you might call a capital gains or growth asset, but it's definitely not a dividend producing or interest producing. It's not a cash flowing asset. Let's put it like that.
Understood. But there's possibly ways to do that versus just, as a storage and hold. Or is the real strategy in the brain we need to be thinking about here kind of like a gold holding, a wealth holding? If you put into it, you hold it for appreciation versus any sort of dividend or cash flow.
Yeah, it depends on the investor objective. So like if yeah, the way that I think about Bitcoin is, like I said, a long-term buy and hold asset. I'm not buying it to produce income, but there are other products available out there that can produce income. STRC is a really good example. That's a preferred stock that's from the company Strategy, who has over 600 and I think 50,000 Bitcoin now on their books. So I'm going to call it a Bitcoin backed stock, but
Mm,
it's designed to have a relatively stable net
mm,
asset value. So the price is not supposed to move by a ton compared to other preferred stocks, but it currently, as of my records, pays about a 9% dividend right now. That dividend can change, but that's an example of not buying Bitcoin directly, but buying a company who buys
into the
Bitcoin.
company who buys Bitcoin.
Yes, who then pays a dividend. Which
Feels a
strategies
little bit more legitimate to some people because
it
that's
can
an
be.
actual company. Do they provide a service or a product beyond that with the Bitcoin they're buying?
Yeah, well, no. So what strategy does is that they have a computer software division in their company, and the revenue from that pays the dividend on STRC.
I see. So as they produce the software and continue to develop and support their customers, that is the mode by which they buy and then dividend
Yeah,
along.
that's exactly right in their current business model.
Okay.
Strategy is a whole nother discussion because
Sure.
what they're doing is basically providing access to Bitcoin for companies that cannot buy Bitcoin, say like
Hmm.
insurance companies who are required to buy bonds. They will buy a strategy bond, which behaves different than all other bonds that I've seen. And that keeps them in their mandates, but then they get access to Bitcoin
There's
behavior.
a whole ecosystem coming up behind this, isn't there?
There's a whole huge bunch of products being built.
Man,
That's right.
there's a lot to unpack in all of this, dude. I think we
Yeah.
just scratched the surface.
Yeah. Strategy is an entire
Yeah.
study on its own.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Is there any other reason why Bitcoin? Like any other thing? Like what do you think ultimately you're doing with that strategy as you lead other people forward? Is it that 10th generational wealth opportunity? Is it just the future, opportunities it might provide? Is it a what if? Is it a Hail Mary? Are you gambling a little bit in this way?
Well, it's it's hard to say gambling or not gambling. What I will say is that Bitcoin is, speculative. It's very volatile. But what I've tried to do, so a couple of things. When I studied Bitcoin, I put over 1,000 hours of study into Bitcoin. What I discovered is that it taught me core economic principles that I otherwise would not have had the opportunity to learn. And so it matured me economically, and I seek to transfer that economic maturity to basically family offices, but then their posterity who want to preserve wealth through the second, third, fourth, fifth generations.
Yeah.
So that's key. But the tripping up, as it were, or sort of entry point trouble for a family office in buying Bitcoin is they don't want, so they've got 100 million or $10 billion. they don't want to have to explain to their heirs or to a board how they just lost 90% in a given investment, which Bitcoin can do in a day or a period or whatever. And so what I've sought to do is to cut volatility by offering basically downside risk mitigated or risk managed Bitcoin portfolios. So the number one concern that I have seen as I've talked about Bitcoin to people is they will say, yeah, that's great. I see the point. I see the value, but the volatility. And I heard that over and over enough to where I thought, we got to do something to help people sort of enter the space without just feeling like they're going to take a bath if Bitcoin drops by 60%, et cetera. So I think that remains at this point in history, the number one, barrier to entry. And so I've sought to bridge that gap.
Awesome. That's a fascinating conversation. I've learned a few things today listening to you. I've got more questions than we can probably unpack in the next little bit. So let's put a pause on this one for now. Let's bring it back. I'm sure there are other people that have questions or, all kinds of questions I would expect. But guys, once you get started listening to Eric, I don't think you're going to want to stop. So we'll bring him back for another episode. Encourage you to come back and we'll keep unpacking this conversation deeper. And then guys, as always, like, comment, share, and engage. Share this with somebody who might have questions about this topic and want to get them asked, put them in the comments, etc. We'll make sure we address them and we'll have you back, Eric. What do you say?
Great. That sounds good. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So just give your quick 30 seconds about your business and we'll put it in the show notes and stuff. Let everybody know how they can connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, listeners can connect with me through my email at eric@veritaswealth.net, or they can find me at familyofficebitcoin.com. Those would be the two main areas.
Awesome.
And so do you want me to just describe my business?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just think. I don't have necessarily a one-liner, but I'll just give you a kind of a one-liner on sort of what I do. I help family offices enter Bitcoin in a responsible way that helps ensure that they are managing the downside of Bitcoin.
There you go. All right. Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming on, man.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, guys. We'll see you on the next episode. Remember, like, share, comment, and engage, and share this with somebody you know. If you leave us a review, we wouldn't mind. If you leave a nasty comment, we don't care. It helps the algorithm one way or another. You can help us get it pushed out. And we'll see you guys on the next episode. Take care.